What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods, or in the mountains, or in deserts or caves, or in small towns, or in remote or rural areas, or while on large bodies of water, or while on an aircraft or nautical vessel? Story 1. Super long story. Too long, don't read. Nearly got murdered backpacking in rural Tasmania. My boyfriend and I were backpacking through rural Tasmania a few years ago. While on a bus, we were discussing our plans for the ensuing 2 weeks. The girl in the seat in front of us turns around and offers us a place to stay in her town. We declined as we were headed elsewhere first, but she gave us her mobile number and said that she and her partner would love to have us. A few days later, we decided to take them up on their offer. We call her and she says they're happy to host us. So far, so good. They meet us at the train station and immediately something feels off. It's really difficult to explain, but it's that primal, ineffable feeling in your guts that tells you that something isn't right. We ignored our guts and followed them. They lead us straight out of town. We asked them where we're going, and they say they live on the outskirts. This town is creepy as heck. It's an old mining town that has largely been abandoned. And as we walk the 15-odd minutes to their home, the houses get worse, with boarded-up windows, overgrown gardens, and no people in sight. Eventually, we reach the house at the very end of the town. It's their house. We go in. Set up in the middle of the living room is a single mattress with a sheet hanging around it. They show us around the house except for one door which stays closed. When I asked what was behind it, they pretended not to hear. Our room has a made bed, chest of drawers, and looks like a normal room. It seems weird that they sleep on mattresses in the living room when they have a guest room. We go back into the living room and look around. Knives. A lot of knives. My boyfriend asks if they go hunting. No. The partner hands one of the knives to my boyfriend and asks him to open it. It's a massive freaking Bowie knife with what looks like blood staining around the edges of the blade. My boyfriend laughs awkwardly and sets it down. They have a tattoo gun to practice. My boyfriend asks if they have any tattoos. No. There's a small axe at the door. I ask if they collect wood. No. Suddenly, the guy says he wants to go to the shops. We agree quickly, because we're creeped out and want to get back into the town. The 4 of us leave and they start walking in the opposite direction to the town. I say that the town is back the other way. The guy says this way would be more interesting because it goes up through the trees. He says that they have never been up the mountain before, but he knows the area and it would take the same amount of time. I tell my boyfriend that I'm freaking out, but he thinks it's okay. We follow them into the trees. The path goes up the mountain. We are going in the total opposite direction of the town. The girl turns around to her partner and whispers, "So where was this place again?" My boyfriend and I freeze. I say I want to take the road back to town and start walking. When the 4 of us arrive in the one shop in town, no one recognizes the couple. And this is a really small town. We make an excuse that we want to go look at sites and that we'll catch up with them later, and instead book a hotel room and freak out. I did some snooping in the area. Their house had an extra room behind the mystery door and a basement. The path that we were taking led straight out of town and up the mountain. There was no way it could loop back into town. So yeah, pretty sure we narrowly avoided being murdered. Or maybe they were just massive weirdos. TBH, the creepiest thing was the fact that there was no drug paraphernalia at all. The state of the house and the weird behavior would have been understandable if they were intoxicated, but that wasn't the case. I don't know why the heck you guys decided to stay with them for so long. The minute I would see just a sheet and a whole collection of knives, I would have left immediately. I'm happy you got away safely, OP, but come on. This feels like you guys pulled a white girl in a horror movie. I've told this before and will stick with me till on my deathbed. Was a high schooler mid-90s. Went fishing off the coast of Corpus Christi with my uncle and cousins. We were about 18 miles out. Been out all day. It was around 8 p.m. and we were gearing up to head back in. It was before DST, so the sun was already going down and getting dark. I was at the stern bringing in the traps. As I'm pulling it in, I see this glow about 100 to 150 feet off. It's nothing I have ever seen. Best way I can describe it, it's like if you stuck a toaster underwater and the orange glowing elements were still working, but still not quite. And it was very large. We were on a 38-foot boat. All I can guess is that it was 5 to 6 times bigger. Kind of hard to judge sizes on open water. The water above it is not churning, but you can tell that it is disturbing it. I don't know, hard to explain. Almost like it was pushing the water up. This whole time I am expecting something to break the surface and just freeze. You know, like when you're walking the dog or something at night, not really paying attention, and a cat or possum runs out, how do you freeze and everything stops? I'm like that the whole time. Finally, I let out a call to my uncle. He comes around and stops right by me. He's not saying anything, just kind of like me. This thing, or whatever the hell, just jets out towards the Gulf. I'm talking about not picking up speed. Instantly jets out. All I say is, have you seen that before? My uncle just says, nope, let's go. I say absolutely nothing the way back, and he doesn't either. My cousin asks us what happened. All my uncle says is nothing. Now, what could it have been? I researched it off and on for the past 25 years, especially when the internet came out. I have found a lot of people seeing something very similar. There's a naval base down there, but no sub-bases we know about. It kind of took over my life for a lot of years. If we have something like that, though, we've been holding out on technology that could change our lives. Story 3. In order to get back home from a popular kebab restaurant, I need to walk a short path through the woods. Although the way there is an extremely old, abandoned, partially collapsed chapel, and occasionally I'll stand there for a few seconds admiring it. It's quite beautiful in its own way. One day during the winter season, I decided to rest there for a minute. So I placed my kebab on the bench right next to the chapel and just stood there taking in the scenery. It was already rather dark and the woods were almost completely silent. But right as I was about to continue my walk, I heard footsteps rapidly getting louder. It was a child running towards me, and as soon as it realized I was there, it started to repeatedly scream, "Run, he is coming," or variations of that same sentiment. I was a bit perplexed by the situation, so I watched the child run past me without moving an inch myself. It didn't take another second for a much weightier pair of footsteps to appear. I could make out a silhouette in the distance, which seemed to be their origin. And at that exact point in time, I got really scared. As opposed to running, I decided to hide in the chapel next to the altar. And after tripping over an old broken chapel bench, I reached my hiding place. The footsteps got louder and louder. But right as they approached the vicinity of the chapel, they suddenly went silent. About 15 seconds of complete quietness had passed just for the words, "Oi, you freaking idiot left your kebab on the bench," to break the silence. Turns out it was a resident of the very same street I inhabit. His nephew was visiting and he wanted to race him to the kebab stand. I don't know whether this is the right place to post this. Ultimately, this is more stupid than creepy. Somebody responded, "Best story here, IMO." Not gonna lie, I thought this post was gonna go in a much worse way. Mainly with OP being skewered like a kebab. It was nice of the guy to bring you your kebab though, lol. Story 4. This took place in the Australian bush around 10-11 at night. I was 17, leading a staggered column of about 60 cadets to our detachment campsite. Due to light discipline rules, only myself at the very front of the group and the other flight commander at the rear had torches on. This was so that any vehicles coming along the trail could see us, and so that most of the cadets could maintain their night vision. We were camouflaged up and thus difficult to see at night. As we walked along, I periodically looked to my sides and kept seeing what looked like dewdrops on the ground, almost like tiny blue gems glinting in my torchlight on either side of the road. I had to maintain my position in this formation, so I couldn't get a good look at what they were. However, after a while, we stopped for a very brief break, and I took the opportunity to have a closer look. Walking over to the side of the trail, I spotted a small cluster of the diamonds and focused my head torch on them. Rather than seeing diamonds or dewdrops or anything remotely pleasant, I instead saw a group of about 5 large spiders just crouching in the leaf litter and staring at me. They looked like huntsmen, which were about the size of an adult's hand. Sweeping my head around, I realized there were thousands of these things, all over the ground, some on the trunks of trees, and everywhere around me, glaring at the light affixed to my head. I had a very brisk walk back to the formation and attempted to play it cool while screaming in my head. Being a massive arachnophobe, I have no clue how I managed to set up a tent and spend the next week in that cursed forest. Story 5. Small town in a relatively rural area. A few years after the fact, I'm now relatively certain it was a skinwalker. About 10 years ago, I was at my dad's house for the weekend in Kentucky. The Appalachian people are very superstitious, hailing from the Scots-Irish people, and just never losing that side of them. My dad wasn't superstitious, I thought, and was not one to be easily scared. It was about, 10 at night, and we randomly decided to go into town to get some McDonald's. Daddy always insisted on walking in front of me, and I always assumed it was so I wouldn't accidentally step on a snake. But now, I don't think that's the case. So he turned on the porch light and opened the screen door. He had put one foot on the porch, and then there was this god-awful sound. I will never in my life forget it. There was a screech followed by the sound of a crow, but it wasn't a crow. The best way I can describe it is if a person was mimicking a crow call. My hair stood up on the back of my neck and my dad retreated into the house. He slammed the big door and locked it, something I'd never seen him do. Before I could ask a question, he said, "It isn't safe. We can go tomorrow morning." And so he did. But the rest of the night, we stayed inside. My dad didn't even go outside to smoke a cigarette. He even let the outside dog stay in the house. We never talked about that again, but that was one of the scariest moments of my life. Story 6. When I was about 7 or 8, my parents sent me to a local summer camp that they would pick me up from in the afternoons. I never really liked it because the kids were mean. Everything was either broken or not clean, and the counselors obviously didn't care. I remember the girls' changing room had a door that led out to the woods, but the doorknob was gone, so it was unlocked all the time and you could see into it. This was primarily where the girls changed into their bathing suits, and there was usually someone blocking the view while we changed so the boys couldn't look in. Well, one day I'm changing alone and someone wasn't blocking the door. I look over and see an eye peeking in through the hole watching me change. I pull the rest of my clothes back on quickly and run out to tell my twin brother. I tell my dad that I don't want to go back to that camp anymore, and he begrudgingly takes us out of the camp pretty soon after, because he knew how much we hated it. Years later, the camp has been closed for many years, and I'm asking my dad about it. He gets really grim and tells me it shut down because a 13-year-old boy had R-worded 7-year-old girl in the woods right behind the girl's bathroom a few weeks after I had told him about someone watching me change. Oh wow, that's absolutely horrible. I thought this was just going to be a peeking Tom story, but I am really happy that OP was able to get out of that before they got hurt. Story 7. During a YMCA camp 15 to 20 years ago, was around 11 to 13 at the time. We were camping in tents in a forest area. It was the middle of summer, so stayed light till around 10 p.m., 11 p.m. till it was fully dark. So we go on a night walk with the group and are halfway into the forest when we notice someone definitely not belonging to our group following us. Camp leaders rushed us back to camp and put us into our tents, with one leader staying up to watch us. Cue halfway through the night, I wake up and have to pee like a madman. Get out of the tent to walk to the bathroom and see the leader supposed to watch us asleep in his chair by the campfire. Look around and see that the guy following us earlier has opened up and is peeking into one of the tents, while fumbling in a bag he has next to him. Scream louder than I ever screamed in my life. Leaders wake up, jump the guy, and hold him till the police arrives. Turns out he has a taser, blindfold, rope, and several knives in his bag. Here's a comment underneath to OP. That made me nearly pee myself. OMG, if you'd not awakened, can you imagine? And OP responded, "Trust me, I've thought about it more than I can count. Pretty sure one or more of those boys would not be here anymore." Story 8. Felt like running at night last year because the park near where I live gets all pretty with the lights on in the dark. So after 5 minutes into the exercise, I feel the need to adjust my shoes, because I forgot to wear a longer sock and they were hurting my ankle. I look up and I see this dark silhouette running towards me at full speed wearing a hoodie, about 50 meters away. I was on the left side of the street and he was on the right, so it was clear he was running towards me. I legit almost soiled my pants and felt an adrenaline surge. I thought about fighting him if he got any closer, but in a blink of an eye, the person trips, falls face planted on the ground, and just starts. Here's a comment from under the post. I have a similar story. I was doing a paper route and a guy in a wheelchair appeared out of nowhere at 3 a.m. just racing towards my car. We encountered him again about a week later. He did the same thing, just hightailed it towards my car in his wheelchair, murder in his eyes. This took place like 2 streets over from our house. We floored it out of there and quit the paper route. Never seen him again. Story 9. When I was a kid, I used to live on a tiny property in the woods. My house was basically built around where stables were once. My room was back when it was still stables, where the hay was stocked. Before getting to the creepy thing, I need to say some other stuff. When you were in my room, you could sometimes smell hay out of nowhere. My dog was always refusing to go upstairs because something was scaring the crap out of it there. You could sometimes hear knocking on doors. There were 3 entrance doors in my house, sometimes all at once. Now that this has been said, we can go to the fun thing. So my room had a big butt window that gave the big view over the woods, and my garden was basically a clearing. Once, I freaking heard a kid giggling from upstairs. I ran there, only to find my window open, and something running out in the woods. I spent 2 more years in this house and felt really insecure the whole time. Story 10. It's 2 a.m. We're in a tent in the woods in Maine. I'm about 8. Mom, there's something creeping around outside the tent. You're dreaming. Go back to sleep. Mom, there really is something out there. No, there isn't. Just then something whaps on the side of the tent, hard enough to shake the whole thing. And my mother, who is entirely too goddamn tired to deal with this crap, sits bolt upright and whaps right back in the same spot. And from outside the tent we hear, meow. Edit, it was a house cat. We didn't hear anything more the rest of the night. Okay, your mom sounds like a really cool lady, but her problem solving may not always be applicable to all scenarios. Like, what if that wasn't a house cat, but something a bit more deadly, and she just tried to hit it back? Story 11. I was driving home after an extremely late night at work. I lived in the middle of nowhere. About a mile before I got there, a woman covered in blood jumped out of the woods into the middle of the road screaming. I panicked and went around her, then slammed on the brakes to help. Her boyfriend had beaten her and was currently chasing after her in the woods. I got her in my car and called the police. They met us at the hospital because I told them there was no way I was waiting on the side of that road when he was coming. Story 12. Cowlitz River, Washington State. Camping with my dad and sister, my buddies, early 90s. Something was throwing rocks and sticks into our camp. We shined a flashlight out and caught a reflection of eyes and a silhouette. Very tall. Kept throwing stuff in our camp randomly for about 15 minutes. We just stoked the fire really high. In the morning, I woke up to heavy footsteps in our camp and something reeked. Woke up my dad. He shook the tent and yelled. Whatever it was ran off. Story 13. Walking on the beach with my boyfriend, and we'd walked to a giant rocky cliff to make out. Somebody was gazing at the ocean, crying and shaking. Mind you, this is late at night, like around 9:30 p.m. We asked him if he was okay. He apologized and practically ran down the cliff, away from the dangerous areas. My boyfriend and I watched him until he reached the public area and decided to call it a night. I'm pretty sure he was gonna jump. OP, you might have saved that dude's life that night. Story 14. I'd been at football training with a few of my cousins when I was about 10 years old. We decided to take a walk before our parents picked us up, so we went along the canal towpath. My cousin looked down at the canal and saw a really nice jacket floating along, and being a weird scavenger person, decided to reach in to fish it out. Well, the jacket turned over, and so did the man wearing it. He also had no face left. Not gonna lie, that was rough. Story 15. Went walking in the woods while camping with an old boyfriend to where the road ended, and found a giant underground cage. After exploring it, we started kissing, and suddenly heard little kids giggling around us. Hightailed it out of there and never looked back. Story 16. I was driving through rural parts of Missouri with a buddy. We drove down a single-lane road that had no exit. At the end of the road, there was a group of deer corpses laid in a perfect circle. I'd say there were at least 10 deer. We BTFO really quick. Story 17. I was a cook on board several NOAA research ships. Up in the Bering Sea, I saw what appeared to be a massive black triangular-shaped craft dive under the water. I viewed it from a distance of maybe 2 nautical miles. Story 18. I was on a camping trip with some friends of mine, and we found like 7 or 8 chipmunks and squirrels all in a pile, but they were all dead without arms or legs.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.